It's the weekly show with David J. Maloney. This week, David talks with legendary guitarist and founder of the band Twisted Sister, JJ French. And now, here's your host, David J. Maloney.
Welcome to everyone at home, and I would normally say our studio audience, to the weekly show. I am your host, David J. Maloney. I say normally because we would usually shoot the show before a small studio audience at the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino, but we are still shooting from home due to coronavirus concerns. And because we are still shooting from home, filling in for our house band, the Mogiles, again with me tonight is my son, Gianni. March is National Problem Gambling Awareness Month. Experts say if you're addicted to gambling, you can be cured, but the odds aren't good. Following Oprah's interview with Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, the royal family is trying to show the world that they're not racists. For example, Prince Andrew has since been hitting on underage girls of color. Oh, and Prince Harry told Oprah that he left a toxic environment. And what a better way to escape a toxic environment than by moving to Hollywood. Oh, and Katie Couric just recently hosted the game show Jeopardy for a week. Yeah, I'll take poor Alex Trebek's substitutes for 1,000. And some sad news. Lou Ottens, the inventor of the audio cassette tape, died this past week at the age of 94. At the funeral, his casket somehow got jammed into the hearse. Fortunately, they were able to get it out using a paperclip and 2 flathead screwdrivers. Let's try that one again. Some sad news. Lou Ottens, the inventor of the audio cassette tape, died this past week at the age of 94. He was buried with a number 2 pencil. No, maybe third time's a charm. Some sad news. Lou Ottens, the inventor of the audio cassette tape, died this past week at the age of 94. According to his will, his pallbearers will have to flip him over halfway through the funeral. And lastly, did you hear this? An Alaskan woman was using an outhouse when she was attacked by a bear from below. The good news is she's no longer constipated. On tonight's show, we welcome the founding member of one of the most popular metal bands of all time. They've been called heavy metal, hair metal, punk, and even glam metal. The lead singer of the band, Dee Snider, once referred to their style as hid metal. We'll find out what their guitarist and founder calls their style, as well as talk about the journey and success of his band after the break, when we have Twisted Sister's very own JJ French on the show. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. G? Our featured guest tonight is a member of one of the more popular hair metal bands of all time. Their particular style found success with audiences nationwide and worldwide, and their music videos were staples of MTV for what seemed like a decade. He's here to chat about the band, the journey, the music, their mark on the music industry. Please give a warm weekly show welcome to Twisted Sisters, JJ French. JJ, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Dave. Appreciate it.
So you were one of the founding members of Twisted Sister, but some of our audience might not know the origin story behind the band, or yourself for that matter. Where did your personal music journey begin?
Well, first, let me just correct one thing. When you use the term hair metal, which some people do, we never regarded ourselves in that world. We weren't part of that world. That world was a LA creation, a Los Angeles creation, of which Poison, Motley, Dokken, I mean, and they wouldn't be happy with that description either, but they existed in the 80s, and Twisted Sister was a 70s bar band that made it in the 80s. That's how we looked at ourselves. You know, we came out of a scene that most people will have they can't imagine what the world would have been like. Forget COVID. The drinking age was 18 in those days, and which meant 15-year-old kids with fake proof got in, and that fake proof was easily made in what is called shop class, which probably does not exist anymore in any school, so nobody would know what shop class is. But it was basically a DIY class, and you learn how to do certain things with metal, and I mean, it was like shop. So there was printing presses, and you could make fake everything. I mean, it was just a joke. It was kind of a joke. And so given the fact that we're a tri-state area band and we came in the tri-state area has the largest pool of people population-wise, and the drinking age was 18, which means 15-year-olds were getting in. You're looking at a pool of 3 to 4 million potential customers within a 50-mile radius of Manhattan. So that's important to understand that, because the bar scene back when Twisted Sister started, which was in late 72, to put it in perspective, Richard Nixon was president at the time. To give you an idea how long it was, Watergate had not happened yet. McDonald's had only 1 million hamburgers sold. This is true. Gas was 23 cents a gallon. And the house rental for the band to live in was $300 a month, not a day. And, and you work in bars and you played cover material, which means songs by other people. And you worked guaranteed 6 nights a week in most of these bars, and you made about $150 a night to start. So if you work 6 nights, you made $900. But at $900, if your house rental's $300 and gas is 23 cents a gallon, you made a profit with a 5-man band. And so hotel rooms were $19.95 a night at the Red Roof Inn. And you generally played one club. You didn't move around from club to club. So you showed up on a Tuesday, stayed until Sunday night. However, you did play 5 shows a night, starting at 9 o'clock in the evening. You went on at 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, and 2, and you ended at 2:40 in the morning. 40 on, 20 off. That's how you did it. And on weekends, usually there were show bands that these venues would hire, like the Coasters, Little Anthony and the Imperial, stuff like that, which meant that you would go on for your last 2 shows at 4 a.m. and finish at 4:40. And that was typical.
Now, I've heard D doesn't really like, the term glam. I think he referred to it kind of as hid metal. Is that the term?
Well, it's because of the way he looks, and he makes fun of the way he looks. I make fun of the way he looks. I mean, I announce him on stage as saying he looks like Sarah Jessica Parker dipped in a vat of acid. I mean, that's how I introduce him, because the British press said that about him, and I thought that was one of the funniest lines I've ever heard. And he makes fun of himself. I mean, he's got a great sense of humor. We were not glam-y, okay? I mean, me and Eddie look cute, good, but otherwise it was a heavy. We had a different vibe. It was not Poison. It was not Motley. And it wasn't Cinderella, even though Cinderella's from the East Coast. We were just a hard-nosed bar band from Long Island who played heavy, super heavy rock and roll, but always had that theatrical view. And so when D finally came in 76, he brought in with him his thing. So we always had a singer who kind of defined who we were. So the first lead singer was a Bowie fanatic. We did a lot of Bowie, right? So that was like the first glam period. Then we had another lead singer for a while who was a Rod Stewart fanatic, and so we kind of looked like the Faces for a while. Very short period of time. He was only in the band for about 2 months, but that was it. Then I took over singing lead for a while because I got sick of lead singers, and I can't sing, so we of course do Lou Reed and Bob Dylan because that's why God created them. So guys like me, you know how you know that you do a Lou Reed song badly. You sing it on key. That's when you know you really screwed up a Lou Reed song. And then that lasted a couple of months. And then my agent said, you're not going to make any money with this Lou Reed crap. You need to sound like Zeppelin. And D could do it. So he had a reputation. And I hired him. But D was also an Alice Cooper fanatic and a Slade fan. And, that kind of a thing. And Alice wasn't glam. He was kind of, theatrically gross rock, right? So D brought that version, and then shortly after D came in, Rocky Horror Show exploded, and so we started playing songs on the Rocky Horror Show, and we went through a phase where we looked like that transvestite stuff that Rocky Horror did. And that was the evolution, basically, of the band. The band always had a look. It was always theatrical, always wore makeup until, of course, the last 10 years when we took it off. And we were inspired by really hard, heavy bands and not glam and wimpy, kind of like, the LA thing was always, it was never really, to me, it had no balls. Plenty of people love it. That's great. I never thought it was great. And I would rather have taken my cues from Slade, Humble Pie, Black Sabbath, Judas Priest, AC/DC. They were heavier bands. And that was kind of the evolution musically.
How hard was it to finally get your first record deal? I mean, I heard it's a pretty crazy story there. Well,
I mean, there's a documentary that tells the story, And it was very hard. Nobody wanted to sign the band. So here we were, super popular, selling out all these clubs, which, again, if you're a musician in a club today, putting COVID aside, and you were able to draw 1,000 people a night minimum, 5 nights a week, and on weekends able to draw 5,000 people to a bar. You understand what I'm saying? A bar that holds 5,000 people. I'm not talking about a club that holds 200 people. I'm talking about bars that held up to 5,000. You would think to yourself, well, if I'm selling out 5,000 seat bars, then I have to be famous and I have to have a record deal. The answer was no. All the record labels in New York said, well, you got to suck. Why? Well, you've been around for years and nobody signed you, so therefore you must suck. I mean, that was really the whole thing. That was like a mentality they all had, you suck. So in the documentary, I mean, I can use profanity. Yes? No?
Yeah,
I mean,
we can always we can do something.
I mean, okay, so in the documentary, We Are Twisted Sister, the whole long tail of the record deal is put out, you know, and it just was constantly, almost, constantly, almost, constantly, almost, constantly, almost. At the last minute, things fell apart over and over and over. And, you know, this story's not unusual. The Beatles were turned down by 29 record labels and Joan Jett by 31. I mean, you know, you're going to have these stories from just about every band. But the way we were turned down was so magnificently torturous that the fact that we actually stayed together and continued onward is really the miracle. Because at one point or another, you say to yourself, how much can you take? You know, how much abuse can you take? How much rejection can you take? I do keynote speeches now, and my book is coming out, and it's called Twisted Business. And basically, I teach the twisted method of business survival, and it's built into the story of the band, because the tenacity that the band had to stay together and go through all this crap is the reason why you're talking to me. If we didn't have that, you wouldn't know me. You wouldn't care. Twisted wouldn't exist, and that would be the end of it.
Well, I might. My family's from Long Island. so
Where?
West Islip, Patchogue, that basically mostly Suffolk County, Bayshore, Babylon. So
yeah, well, I mean, yeah, we played the Stony Brook Mad Hatter for years. The Comac Arena, you know, which we played with Leslie West at the Comac Arena. I mean, that one, 76, and Tommy James. I mean, from Hammerheads was in West Islip.
Yes, Hammerheads. I know exactly where that was. That was literally that was literally up the street from my grandmother's house.
Yeah. So kids understand what Hammerheads was. Hammerheads was a former A&P supermarket that was transformed to a club that held 3,000 people with a gigantic parking lot, because, you know, parking lots in Long Island were gigantic.
Yeah, now I think there's like a car dealership there or something. I mean, it's a big lot. It's right off of what, Sunrise, I think.
Yeah, right off Sunrise Highway. So yeah. I mean, if you look at Long Island, the size of the rooms in Long Island, the biggest one by sheer numbers was Hammerheads, followed probably by the OBI East out in the Hamptons, which was a former hotel catering hall, which then transformed itself into a concert venue, which was a bar.
No, I believe it or not, I spent a New Year's at the OBI once.
So you know.
I know the OBI chain. Yeah, you got to go over the bridge.
The East.
What was it like finding your first real success in the UK? I mean, that had to feel kind of weird, because you guys have been grinding in this club circuit in the US all those years, right? And then you kind of blew up in the UK first, no?
Well, we were huge here, but nobody else cared. So we had an independent single that we released, and it wound up on a playlist for a magazine called Sounds, which was a big rock paper. And some fan came into a bar one night at the Beggar's Opera in Queens and said, "Man, you're like number one on a playlist." And I'm looking at him going, "What? Whoa, number one what? Who? What?" "Yeah, man, this playlist in this magazine." They pulled out a copy of Sounds magazine, and there was a journalist, like all the writers would have their favorite singles. It was like a really underground, uber hip thing. And there was Malcolm Dome or Gary Bushell or Jeff Barton, one of the journalists, and he had like a list, you know, top 10 singles: Tigers of Pantang, Motorhead, Iron Maiden, Budgie, all these, you know, British bands. And then at number one that week was Under the Blade from our single. We're like, oh my God, the world has heard.
But then at some point you were sought out by Atlantic for a record deal when they had passed you up before, right?
Yeah, but see, Atlantic already passed on us in the U.S. a number of times, and they hated us. It didn't just pass on us. The president went out of his way to say we suck to his entire record staff. He said the next guy that even mentions the name will be fired. So we go to England and we do a television show. And again, anyone can watch it online on YouTube. Put in Twisted Sister Marquee. No, Twisted Sister The Tube, Tube. And it was a performance we did on live television. And I won't get into the specifics, and it's another long story. The bottom line is we did so well on that show that we were offered multiple record deals the next day in England by every major label. But the label that wanted us most was Atlantic. He apologized to me for his attitude. He said he was wrong. And he opened up the purse strings, brought Tom Werman in. We recorded Stay Hungry. And again, if that didn't happen, you and I wouldn't be sitting here, because those videos, were famous.
I want to talk about those videos, but first we've got to go to a quick commercial break. So we're going to go to a quick commercial break, and then we're going to be back with JJ French of Twisted Sister. And we are back with JJ French of Twisted Sister. We were talking about when you first got signed on to Atlantic, and we just started touching base on MTV. Your music videos became like a staple of MTV, and you guys kind of became known for having a specific style. It was almost comedic to me, of music video that everyone loved. Was it the band that came up with that idea? The studio producers? Who came up with the idea for that?
The band was a fan of Animal House, which is why Mark Metcalf is in it. I kind of look at the whole MTV era, and I say to myself, the bands that made it because of goofy rock videos paid the price of never being taken seriously.
Well, and that raises an interesting question, because I've talked with other artists about this, and it's always an interesting perspective to get. Did you ever exit the studio fully believing a certain song you recorded was definitely going to be a hit, only to have a completely different song be the one that everybody loved?
Maybe. I mean, Dee writes anthems. He's been always writing anthems. He goes back to I'll Never Grow Up Now as the first anthem. If you look at the template of the song, you could say to yourself, wow, I can see elements of that song in our first single, Never Grow Up Now. And our second single, Bad Boys of Rock and Roll, was also an anthem. And then The Kids Are Back is an anthem, and You Can't Stop Rock and Roll are anthems. I don't know if when I heard We're Not Gonna Take It, I thought, wow, man, that's huge.
Was there ever a song that you guys really loved that just got cut by a producer or the label?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we presented a whole bunch of songs for our first album. Comeback was one of them. It got turned down for the first album. It was one of the first ones. Dee wrote Pay the Price, Come Back. Pay the Price, Come Back, and Under the Blade, I think, were the first three that Dee wrote.
When you guys did Stay Hungry, when you guys were in the studio while you were doing it, did you guys have an inkling that it was potentially gonna make this stamp on or permanent mark on music history, kind of like it has?
Well, if you were watching your contemporary artists at the same time, there seemed to be a pattern. And I kind of describe it as little jets on the runway. Every major label had a little jet, a little heavy metal jet. This is the metal jet called Motley. This is the metal jet called Rat. This is the metal jet called Whitesnake. And every 2 months, this little jet would take off, and it would take off with a video, and it would be a hit. So when the Rat jet took off, and we were finishing our record in California, our engineer, Jeff Workman, who had worked on Motley's albums with Werman, said to us, I guarantee this album will go platinum. I remember he said that in the studio. He said, I guarantee you this is a platinum record. So that was the first time that I ever heard somebody say, oh, this is a hit. And then I thought, okay, maybe we're one of those jets on the runway. Maybe our timing for the first time is impeccable, because our timing had been terrible. All these other years, we came in afterwards. We were the band that kind of copied a look that was looking like something. But, here Twisted was the leading edge. We weren't the back end. That's a really important thing to understand. You know, there's leading edges, there's middles, and then there's ends. So we were in the leading edge. So Molly comes out, their hit Rat comes out, their hit Quiet Riot opened the door with Metal Health in '82. So I would say Quiet Riot first.
Now, and you guys lived through some of the more famous and infamous moments in music and touring history. Are there any memories that stick out to you most from your touring days? I mean, is there a story that's so crazy or off the wall that people never believe you when you tell it?
Oh, and I remember we pulled up to one of the clubs, and it was packed with women. And we're thinking, wow, man, chicks, you know, this is great. You know, they're everywhere. Like, you know, this is what it's like to be a rock star. It turns out that the opening act was male strippers. so we loaded in the back thinking, man, this is going to be like hot. The chicks are great. The chicks hear the girls screaming, ah. And you look out, and there's like male strippers. The minute they get left, all the girls.
Yeah, and then D has to come out with his face. Right.
Yeah, come out and leave, you know. So the girls so that kind of sucked.
Was there anyone you toured with or played festivals with whose backstage persona was either actually greater than their onstage persona or vice versa, like totally opposite of what you think?
I hate to tell you this, I never talked to anybody. I had no interest. I was so busy trying to make sure we were okay that on the rare occasion that I got to see a band, I got to see a band for a song and never bothered to hang out. I never had an interest. I was older than, you know, I was 34 at the time, and I really didn't care. My job was to go on stage and blow you away anyway. So if my job was to blow you off the stage, I don't care who you are. That's, you know, that was the predatory view of Twisted Sister as a bar band. We need to destroy you. It just means we need to go over better than you. That's what I mean. Doesn't mean I don't like you. Doesn't mean you're not great people. Doesn't mean your band isn't great. That's not the point. The point is just to put on a better show. That's my job. So I remember the first time we played with ZZ Top, they arrived separately. They went on stage separately and they left separately. And I said to somebody, "What's up with that?" And they go, "Oh, yeah, it's just a business to them. You know,
yeah,
they just show
do it and get out."
Yeah, and then I realized I'm in the only business where we sell this myth that there's a family here. You know, in any other business, you go into the office, you don't go home with your coworker. So this one particular show was ZZ Top. The guys all showed up separately. They all walked up on stage. They did it a million times. They know the drill. Song starts, whatever, intro song. They do their show. Everyone's loving it. It was great. Got off separately, separate group, separate friends, and disappeared.
I really appreciate you being on, JJ. I mean, wow. I mean, we've covered so much ground. So just thank you, ladies and gentlemen, from Twisted Sister, JJ French.
Thank you. Take care, David.
That is our show for tonight. Thank you so much for watching. A special thanks to JJ French of Twisted Sister for joining us. We're going to continue chatting with JJ on next week's show, so please tune in and watch. Taking us home tonight, still filling in for our house band, the Mojiles, is my son, Gianni.